She was just a hotel cleaner, a black woman wiping marble floors in a world where she was never meant to shine. But when a phone rang in the Grand Plaza's gold-drenched lobby, and Zoe answered in fluent Dutch, her life flipped in real time. It was supposed to be just another shift, mopping footprints off floors richer than her entire yearly paycheck. But this time the call came from the university. The call. The one she'd waited 6 years for. 6 rejections, 6 shut doors. And now, on the 7th try, fate dialed in. Rule number 1 from Manager Richards: no phones on shift. Especially for cleaners. But Zoe knew that number. She ducked behind a marble column, heart racing. "One moment," she whispered, as her whole future hung on the next few seconds. "Zoe Johnson," she answered, voice low. On the other end, Professor Van Ton, speaking rapid Dutch. She answered fluently, effortlessly, like the linguistics prodigy she was. Her pronunciation was crisp, smooth, flawless. They talked about her scholarship, her motivation letter that might have arrived late. She explained in Dutch. "Mijn motive was te laat." But then dead silence. Not from the call, from the room around her. Zoe froze. She looked up, and locked eyes with Richard Coleman, the billionaire, the owner of the entire Grand Plaza chain. Standing right there. Watching. Right next to him. Manager Richards looked like she'd swallowed a lemon, eyes blazing. Zoe panicked. "I have to go. Iqbal J later Terry," she stammered in Dutch, ending the call. "Johnson. In my office. Now." Richard's voice split the air like a whip. The walk to the basement office felt like a walk to exile. Her colleagues stared. Some with pity. Others smirking, waiting for the fall. She was the only black woman in the department with a college degree, and Richards never let her forget it. The second the door slammed, the attack began. "You know the rules. No phones." And what the hell language was that? French? Dutch? Zoe corrected without thinking, instantly regretting it. Richards leaned in, her voice venomous. "I don't care if it was Martian. What I do care about is the owner of this hotel seeing one of my cleaners talking on the phone like she's some diplomat instead of mopping the damn floor." The injustice tasted bitter. White receptionists took personal calls all the time, laughing in front of guests without a single word from management. But Zoe? She was the target. Always. 3 months, Richard snapped. Convention center bathrooms. You can speak in all the languages you want while scrubbing after banquets. Zoe's stomach dropped. That meant double shifts. No overtime. Late nights. Her usual punishment. You can go. And be thankful you're not fired. That night, Zoe curled up in her tiny room. Just 300 square feet she shared with 2 nurses. She didn't make a sound, but her eyes flooded as she stared at the framed degree from Georgetown. The international language certificates now faded on the cracked wall. 6 years of wiping toilets while sending resumes that no one ever called back. 6 years of pushing through interviews only to get ghosted after seeing her skin, her hair, her name. But the next morning, something changed. She showed up early, professional, silent, determined. And then, another call. This time from the front desk. "Zoe Johnson," said Jennifer, the head receptionist. "HR wants you. Immediately." HR? On the top floor? Next to the executive offices? That was sacred ground for cleaners. She'd never been there before. In the elevator, she stood invisible, surrounded by suits discussing deals worth millions. No one looked her way. No one ever did. The HR director stood as she walked in. "Please have a seat," he said. Zoe tensed, bracing for the blow. Fired, probably. She'd humiliated the hotel, right? Wrong. "Mr. Coleman has requested a meeting with you." Wait, what? His office was bigger than her apartment. He sat there like he ruled the universe. And in a way, he did. Richard Coleman. Billionaire hotel mogul. Fixer of broken empires. And now studying her. Dutch. French. Italian. Mandarin? He asked, tapping a folder. She blinked, confused. "Your resume," he said. "I asked HR for it the moment I heard you speaking yesterday." Then calmly. "Honors degree in linguistics. Fluent in 6 languages. 2 of them Asian. Working as a hotel cleaner for 6 years. Why?" Zoe didn't speak. She couldn't. Because what she didn't know yet, what no one in that building suspected, was that this wasn't some random twist of fate. That phone call in Dutch? It was the start of something massive. A chain reaction. A truth bomb wrapped in scholarship letters and marble floors. A story that would unravel layers of quiet discrimination, expose an industry blind to brilliance, and shine a light on the hidden geniuses scrubbing floors while dreaming in 5 different languages. Zoe Johnson's life wasn't just about to change. It was about to start a revolution. If there's one moment that can stir your soul and ignite outrage, it's this one. A simple phone call in a foreign language that would unravel a chain reaction no one, not even a billionaire hotel mogul, could have seen coming. For a few seconds, Richard Coleman's executive office was dead silent. Zoe stood there frozen, still processing what she'd just heard. He knew her. Not as some invisible figure in a cleaning uniform, not as the black girl in housekeeping, but as the highly educated, overlooked woman she really was. 6 years, Coleman repeated, closing the folder slowly, his arms crossing. Tell me something, Ms. Johnson. Why is a Georgetown-trained linguist cleaning my bathrooms instead of running international translations? Zoe took a breath, steady, but thick with years of humiliation. I sent 47 resumes to the International Relations Department of this hotel, she said. Not a single reply. I applied for an internal transfer 12 times. Every one of them denied. Coleman's eyes sharpened. By who? Manager Richards and Mr. Whitmore, Director of Operations. Without a blink, Coleman jotted both names down. Interesting. Whitmore regularly complains to me that we're short on multilingual staff, especially during Asian conferences. His voice had cooled, but something in his tone said he was putting pieces together fast. What Zoe didn't know was that 3 months earlier, Coleman had quietly hired a private firm to investigate rising turnover among non-white staff in his East Coast hotels. What they uncovered disturbed him. And now he had a face, a voice, to attach to the numbers. Zoe, I'll be direct, Coleman said, leaning forward. Tomorrow, we're hosting a major trade conference with Dutch and Chinese delegates. I need someone who speaks both languages fluently and understands cultural nuance. Zoe blinked. You want me to clean their rooms? A small, knowing smile crossed Coleman's face. I want you to be our interim international relations coordinator for this event. Starting today. Pay is $5,000 a week. She nearly dropped her purse. Why me? She asked, still stunned. There must be hundreds of qualified candidates. I heard you speak Dutch like a native. You have the credentials. And frankly, he paused. I believe something's deeply wrong inside this company. And you're part of the proof. An hour later, Zoe walked into the elevator with a new badge clipped to her chest and full access to hotel systems. HR had fast-tracked her paperwork. She wasn't a cleaner anymore. She was a department coordinator. On her way out, she ran into Manager Richards. The look on the woman's face, priceless. Johnson, Richards snapped. What are you doing up here? Where's your uniform? Working, Ms. Richards, Zoe replied coolly. I'm the International Relations Coordinator now. At Mr. Coleman's request. You? That's impossible. You don't have the qualifications. Georgetown, fluent in 6 languages including Mandarin and Dutch, Zoe interrupted, her voice calm, crisp, and professional. My resume has been in the system for 6 years, along with 12 transfer requests. Richard's mouth opened, then closed again, stunned into silence. Zoe walked past her without another word. In HR, she met someone unexpected. Zoe Williams, a newly hired recruitment analyst who actually seemed excited to see her. Finally, she exclaimed. I saw your file when I started and couldn't figure out why someone with your background was in housekeeping. I tried, Zoe said. I pushed for transfers. Whitmore shot them down every time. That afternoon, as Zoe prepped for the conference in the executive suite, she noticed something troubling. The welcome materials included Mandarin translations, bad ones. Not just wrong, but offensive. A few poorly chosen words could spark major diplomatic damage. She quickly revised the documents, fixing each error line by line. That's when she sensed someone behind her. How did you know they were wrong? Coleman asked from the doorway. Zoe turned. The translation used terms that are borderline disrespectful in formal Chinese. Whoever did this knows the language, but not the culture. Whitmore insisted he hired the best translators, Coleman muttered. He didn't verify anything, Zoe said, pointing to a botched line in a partnership proposal. This alone could have tanked the entire deal. The next morning, Zoe walked into that conference like she belonged there, because she did. She floated effortlessly from Mandarin to Dutch, guiding conversations, building bridges, and solving problems in real time. Delegates took note. Executives watched in quiet awe. During a break, a familiar face approached, Whitmore, a man who hadn't spoken a word to her in 6 years. "Miss Johnson," he said, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Impressive work. Manager Richards clearly underestimated your potential." "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore," Zoe replied, her voice velvet-wrapped steel. "It's especially impressive that my resume, with fluency in Mandarin, was ignored, while the hotel spent $50,000 on botched translation services." Whitmore's smile stiffened. "There must be some misunderstanding." Zoe smiled back. "There usually is." And just like that, the invisible woman had become the most essential player in the room. But this wasn't just about a promotion or pay. It was about the truth, the reckoning, and the moment a silent voice finally got heard. I received confirmation of every email I sent over the past 6 years, Zoe interrupted, her voice calm but razor-sharp, including the ones alerting you to critical translation errors during past Asian conferences. What Zoe didn't say out loud, at least not yet, was that her new ally in HR, Zoe Williams, had discreetly granted her access to translation contract records. That's how she discovered the truth. The translation firm hired for those high-stakes events belonged to none other than Whitmore's niece, a niece who had zero experience in formal Mandarin, yet charged premium expert-level fees. Worse, every single translation done under her company contained subtle yet dangerous errors. Sloppy words, cultural faux pas, diplomatic minefields, mistakes that could have cost the hotel millions, and its reputation. On the third day of the international conference, just as things were finally running smoothly, something unexpected happened. During a short break, one of the Dutch businessmen looked at Zoe, then did a double take. "Wait, aren't you the student who wrote that brilliant piece on linguistic variation in international business?" he asked. "Published in the Journal of Applied Linguistics?" Zoe blinked, surprised. "Yes, I am. I've cited your work at 2 conferences," he said, calling over a group of colleagues to meet her. "It was groundbreaking." Zoe smiled, humbled, but Coleman, watching from across the hall, saw something else. He saw Whitmore standing stiffly in the corner, his face tight, his eyes darting nervously. What Whitmore didn't know was that while he smiled and pretended nothing was wrong, Zoe had been methodically building a case, a quiet, calculated takedown of the corrupt machinery operating right under his nose. This wasn't about one promotion anymore. It was about systemic rot, discrimination, greed, and truth. Because no one at the Grand Plaza Hotel realized that the black cleaning lady, who answered a phone call in Dutch, wasn't a fluke or a mistake. She was part of a plan, a storm gathering quietly. And it wasn't just her life that would change, it was dozens, maybe hundreds. The real question now wasn't whether she could prove what had happened. It was how devastating the fallout would be once she did. On the morning of day 4, the hotel was buzzing. Zoe's leadership had helped secure 3 major preliminary contracts. Executives were elated. But then she saw something that made her stomach turn. Whitmore was escorting a young, visibly anxious woman toward the executive elevators. "Miss Whitmore, your Mandarin translation is adequate," he was saying under his breath. "There's no need to panic." Zoe's eyes narrowed. Whitmore. The girl was carrying a folder labeled Final Translation, Master Contract. Zoe managed a quick glance as they passed, and her heart dropped. The same critical errors from past events were still in the documents. She didn't wait. She raced to the executive floor and burst into Coleman's office. "Zoe," he asked, startled. "What is it?" "Whitmore is replacing my corrected translations with flawed versions from his niece," she said, holding up her phone. "And I have proof it's been happening for years." Coleman's expression darkened. "Are you certain?" I have everything, Zoe said. Invoices, screenshots, emails, payments made to his niece's company, 3 times the market rate, while qualified candidates like me were stuck cleaning toilets. At that moment, Zoe Williams from HR rushed in, holding a folder. Mr. Coleman, sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this. Inside were 5 years' worth of hiring records. A clear, repeated pattern. Qualified non-white applicants, especially women, systematically rejected or buried in departments far below their capabilities. Coleman flipped through the documents, his jaw tightening with every page. The outside investigation raised red flags, he muttered. But this is deliberate. Then, without knocking, Whitmore walked in. Richard, he said, all smiles. The Dutch are ready to sign. There's just a bit of confusion in the translations. Johnson must have mixed something up. The room fell into silence. Coleman rose from his chair and closed the office door behind Whitmore. Thomas, he said quietly, dangerously. I'm reviewing $50,000 in payments for translation services riddled with errors. Meanwhile, qualified multilingual staff are scrubbing bathrooms. Can you explain that? Whitmore paled. I don't know what you're talking about. We hire the best. Your niece, Coleman cut in coldly. Ashley Whitmore. She's certified. No, she's not, Zoe said, stepping forward and placing a printed email on the table. I confirmed with Peking University this morning. They've never issued her any certification. Her resume is a lie. Whitmore turned to her, face flushed with rage. You're nobody, he hissed. Just a cleaning lady playing dress-up. Zoe didn't flinch. PhD in Applied Linguistics. Georgetown University, she replied. 6 published academic papers. All on file in HR. And unlike your niece, I know what I'm doing. She paused. You've lost. And in that moment, Whitmore finally understood. The woman he had dismissed for 6 years had just taken apart everything he built, with evidence, intelligence, and elegance. Coleman turned to HR. Suspend him. Effective immediately. We'll launch a full internal audit by the end of the day. As Whitmore was escorted out, Zoe didn't smile. She didn't gloat. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice finally speaking, fluent, powerful, and long overdue. Repeatedly, Coleman's voice cut like steel. Thomas, I've called an emergency board meeting in 30 minutes. By then, I want her resignation letter on my desk. Whitmore chuckled nervously. You can't be serious. Because of this? This cleaning lady. Coleman narrowed his eyes. Choose your next words with extreme care. 2 hours later, the executive auditorium was packed to capacity. Every manager, supervisor, and department head had been urgently summoned. Even the Dutch and Chinese business executives, unaware of what was about to unfold, sat quietly in the front row. Sarah Richards, the cleaning department manager, looked bewildered, seated awkwardly between other directors. Tension clung to the air like smoke. Richard Coleman stepped onto the stage. At his side stood Zoe Johnson, calm, dignified, and no longer in a faded cleaning uniform. Today, Coleman began solemnly, we uncovered a deeply disturbing pattern of discrimination and nepotism that has cost this company millions, and far more in moral capital. Gasps echoed through the auditorium. For years, he continued, key managers, including Thomas Whitmore and Sarah Richards, have enforced unofficial policies that marginalized qualified employees and funneled inflated contracts to their unqualified family members. These actions have damaged not just careers, but our reputation. Behind him, a massive screen lit up. Slide after slide showed damning data. Employee qualifications versus job titles, rejection rates broken down by race and gender, and contracts awarded to relatives at 3 times the market rate. The numbers were impossible to ignore. And yet, Coleman said, his voice softening, amid all this, one woman, whom most of you only knew as a cleaning lady, saved us from a cultural and financial disaster this week. By catching translation errors that could have cost us millions in diplomatic fallout. The Asian executives in the front row nodded in acknowledgement. A few began clapping quietly. Therefore, Coleman announced, Thomas Whitmore has been terminated for cause. Effective immediately. Gasps turned to stunned silence. Sarah Richards is suspended pending a full investigation into her involvement. And starting today, we're launching an independent audit of all hiring and promotion decisions made in the last 5 years. A heavy, stunned quiet fell over the room. Some managers exchanged anxious glances. Others stared straight ahead, pale and motionless. But in the back row, where the cleaning crew and support staff sat, applause began to rise, tentative at first, then swelling with pride and raw emotion. Coleman wasn't finished. "I am pleased to announce," he said, smiling now, "that Dr. Zoe Johnson will assume the new role of Global Director of Internal Communications. She will oversee all multilingual operations for Grand Plaza International." The room erupted in applause, some polite, others genuinely enthusiastic. But from the back, tears glistened in the eyes of those who had spent years being unseen. For them, this was more than a promotion. It was proof that justice, however delayed, had arrived. As Zoe stepped off the stage, she passed Thomas Whitmore, who was being escorted out by security, his face twisted with fury, his last shred of power slipping through his fingers. He glared at her, sneering, "You won't last a month." Zoe simply smiled. In her blazer pocket, a recording device rested, a quiet witness to every whispered threat and racist remark Whitmore had made in desperation. That night, in her new office overlooking the city skyline, Zoe finally let the tears fall. Not out of sadness. Out of release. 6 years of being ignored, overlooked, and dismissed, erased in 1 week of truth. She picked up the phone and called her mother. "I did it, Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I finally did it." What no one at the Grand Plaza Hotel had anticipated that day was that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The first domino in a quiet revolution that would ripple through not just one company, but the entire hospitality industry. 6 months later, that ripple had become a wave. Zoe's new office on the 32nd floor looked out over all of Manhattan. The plaque on her door was simple but powerful. Dr. Zoe Johnson, Vice President, Diversity and International Relations. The paycheck was 5 figures monthly, not annually. But the real power wasn't in the money, it was in what she was building. Across the boardroom, the restructuring committee was assembled. Her assistant, Zoe, now also her closest friend, poked her head in. "All regional managers are on the call," she said. "The board's waiting for your final presentation." Zoe nodded and took a deep breath. Today was the launch of the Invisible Talents Initiative, a program she had designed herself. It aimed to identify, support, and promote employees who had been silently, systematically overlooked due to race, gender, or social bias. It was personal. It was necessary. And it was already changing lives. Inside the conference room, Richard Coleman and the full board sat ready, eyes on her. Zoe took her place at the head of the table, confident, poised. "Let's begin," she said. What started as a simple phone call in Dutch had turned into a reckoning. A revolution of truth, justice, and transformation. And for Dr. Zoe Johnson, this was just chapter 1. Across every Grand Plaza property, the screen lit up with a live broadcast from corporate headquarters. Executives, housekeeping staff, and managers from dozens of hotels leaned in. In the spotlight stood Dr. Zoe Johnson, Vice President of Diversity and International Relations, calm and composed as always, ready to unveil the final results of her pilot program. "The results of the Invisible Talents Initiative have exceeded all expectations," Zoe began, the screen behind her glowing with data. "In just 6 months, we identified 147 employees across our chain with high-level skills in languages, finance, management, and technology. People who were previously overlooked and placed in roles far beneath their qualifications." She paused to let the impact settle. 83% of them were Black, Latino, or from other marginalized groups. A quiet murmur spread through the crowd. Coleman, seated near the front, nodded subtly. The initiative had been one of his first demands after taking control. Not just to correct what had happened to Zoe, but to correct an entire broken system. But the most impressive result, Zoe continued, is the financial impact. Outsourced translation costs are down 78%. International customer satisfaction is up 42%. And for the first time in our company's history, our diversity index is now ranked at the top of the hospitality industry. Applause broke out, not just from the suits in the front, but from the support staff gathered at break rooms across the country. All of this, she added, while simply recognizing and promoting the people we already had, the people hiding in plain sight. Sarah Richards watched the presentation on a small TV in a modest employee lounge at a second-rate hotel in California. After a full investigation into her hiring practices, she'd avoided termination by accepting a demotion and relocation. Now she managed the laundry department, a daily humiliation for someone who once had the power to erase potential with a single decision. And yet, here she was, watching the woman she'd tried to silence become the face of a nationwide transformation. Back at the headquarters, Zoe explained the next phase. The program will now expand to include a peer mentoring system. Every promoted individual will commit to identifying and developing the next wave of talent. Thomas Whitmore wasn't present at the broadcast. After his dismissal, no luxury hotel chain would touch him. Allegations of embezzlement and systematic discrimination had followed him everywhere. Rumor had it he was now working as a night manager at a roadside motel in Arizona. His niece Ashley, stripped of her fraudulent credentials, was forced to return all her payments and complete a professional ethics course. Ironically, she was now studying Mandarin, thanks to a scholarship established by the very foundation Zoe had helped launch. As the presentation neared its end, Zoe paused, then turned directly to the camera, broadcasting to every employee in the chain. "I want to end by sharing something personal." The room quieted. "When I was little, my mother worked as a maid at a hotel like this one. She had a college degree, but she never got the chance to work in her field." Zoe's voice tightened just slightly. "She always told me, Zoe, no matter how much they try to make you feel invisible, your worth does not depend on their recognition." She took a breath. "My mother died believing some doors would always stay closed to people like us. She didn't live to see this day. She didn't see what her sacrifice made possible." Several executives shifted in their seats, some discreetly wiping their eyes. "The true power of a company isn't how much it profits," Zoe said, "but how much potential it unlocks." Across the hospitality industry, and beyond, this message resonated. For decades, companies had buried incredible talent beneath service uniforms, assuming accents, skin tone, or social background equaled incompetence. But that illusion was now shattered. Coleman stood and began clapping. Others quickly followed, a standing ovation rolling through the auditorium and out to every screen across the chain. Later that afternoon, Zoe returned to her office overlooking Manhattan. An envelope sat on her desk. Inside was a postcard from Amsterdam and a letter from the University of Applied Linguistics. It was an invitation to serve as a visiting professor. The man who had made that fateful phone call in Dutch 6 months ago, Professor Vanton, had followed Zoe's story from afar and wanted her to help educate the next generation of global communicators. Zoe smiled, placing the card by the window. Funny, she thought. If Richards had just given me a warning that day, I might still be cleaning rooms, my PhD collecting dust. The next morning, Zoe launched a new scholarship program, funded partly from her own executive salary. Its purpose? To help hotel employees and their children access higher education. The first recipient? The teenage daughter of one of her former cleaning colleagues. A girl who dreamed of studying hotel management and running her own chain one day. What had started as a simple phone call in Dutch had grown into a wave of change. A quiet revolution far bigger than one hotel, one company, or one woman. Zoe's greatest revenge wasn't watching her enemies fall. It was watching people like her finally rise. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect on how silent prejudice can bury extraordinary talent, leave a comment below and share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true stories of people who've turned injustice into power and pain into purpose. Because Zoe Johnson didn't just open a door, she made sure it would never close again.